Hello, welcome to Everyday Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be doing the Bible and reading Mara. We are not going to be doing a synopsis for today.
No, I'll do the synopsis.
Oh, that's doing the
synopsis. Yeah, here's the synopsis.
Stop happened.
Yeah, the synopsis is Shintu. Is that his name? Chef2. Sorry, Chef2 raided the tomb. They got all the loot from the king, from the old king that died, and Mara waited for him, and she waited some more, and she's getting a little suspicious of that juggler. I don't know what the deal is with him. And then finally he came, but he noticed the ring, and so now, like, I don't know, maybe she's dead. I don't know yet. Yeah. Before he noticed the ring, they kissed, and you know, blah blah blah, whatever. Some stuff happened.
Okay. No, he finally pledged his undying love to her, and said they would never be parted again. And he kissed her, and it was whoa.
Yeah, but she was kind of like, I don't know if this is gonna last past tomorrow morning. So
only because she's lying.
No, because she's a slave.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So anyway, all right. So yeah. Okay. So that's the synopsis. I know we're a little bit out of order today. I am about to give you I do see one person on, so if you're there, please let me know. Look at that. Okay, so there is the passage from Ephesians that I'm fixing to read. As I've said in the past, we have General Electric Power Company. That's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Easy way to remember it. Right after Colossians is the Thessalonians. That's two parts of Thessalonians. Right before Galatians is the Corinthians. That's two parts of the Corinthians. So that's Corinthians A and Corinthians B, because if you look at it in the Greek, that's how they're labeled, alpha and beta, not 1 and 2. But it is what it is. Here we are in Ephesians chapter 5. In the English Standard Version of the Bible, I've already posted the link, so you can find it if you want to follow along and you don't have your Bible handy. So here we are. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them, for at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true, and try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is, and do not get drunk with wine, that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. And that is the end of Ephesians chapter 5. Tomorrow we will conclude Ephesians with the whole armor of God. And children, we get to find out whether or not children should obey their parents. In Ephesians chapter 6, Paul settles the answer once and for all. So there it is. All right. So what did you say? Okay. All right, so that was a little random. I'm going to take some drink of water here. Rebecca says, hey, guys. JJ said hi. I said hi. All righty. Now we're going to start. Mara chapter 20. We have, and I found out, so we have 6 chapters left to go. The last chapter is like 2 pages. It's like a quick epilogue. So let's see how far we can get to see whether or not we can finish this tomorrow. If you have a suggestion for what you want me to read, this is a good time for me to just put a little plug in. I already have a 98% chance of what I know I'm going to read next. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this channel, but it's going to be a surprise. About 98%. But if you have something that you've read or that you like that meets the criteria, the only criteria that I'm putting out here is that the author needs to, I don't want to read anything by living authors. And just for a variety of reasons. So that's what I'm going to put out there. So like I said, I think I know what I'm going to read next. But if you have any suggestions, please put them in the comments so that we can make a list. Actually, I kind of have a list of different books that I would like to read. I think we're probably starting Lord of the Rings in January. That's what I'm thinking. And so we will build up into that, and we'll see how far what other books that we can read before then. Or maybe I'll start The Hobbit in January. That's probably more likely. And we might break it up into 4 different sections. So The Hobbit, Fellowship, Towers, and Return of the King. I know that's something that a lot of people have wanted me to read. So that is definitely on the list, but it is not probably going to be next. All right, so with all that said and wasting too much time saying it, let's start with part 6, The Trap. This is the final part. Chapter 20, The Bait. The little flame still burning in Sheftu's bedside lamp flickered orange and transparent in the flood of morning sunlight. Old Irenaeus, letting himself into the room at the usual hour with his master's breakfast, halted in astonishment at the sight of it. Setting down the salver of fruit and soft cheese, he hurried around the end of the tall couch where his lordship still lay, and picked up the snuffer which stood on the table beside the lamp. But to To his further astonishment, Lord Sheftu sat bolt upright, seized his wrist, and snarled, "Leave it! Let be!" "But, your lordship," protested Irenaman in bewilderment, "I meant only to snuff the lamp here." Sheftu loosed the old man's wrist and rubbed a hand over his eyes. Daylight fell strong and clear over the tumbled, twisted coverlets and linen sheets. The night was over. "Of course," he said more quietly. "Put it out, Irenaman. I fear I was not quite awake." "Aye, that's it, still dreaming." Irenaman extinguished the flame and hobbled back around the couch to set out the fruit for the perfuming of the mouth. Why do we think that Chef 2 was a little anxious about the light being snuffed out? Because he was in the dark for 5 hours in that tomb that was underground, and that was really scary. All right. But Irenaman doesn't know that, of course. "Aye, that's it, still dreaming." Irenaman extinguished the flame and hobbled back around the couch to set out the fruit for the perfuming of the mouth. Remember, that's what they called breakfast. "However, I wonder you slept at all with a lamp shining in your eyes. I cannot think what careless slave would have—" "I lighted the lamp, Irenaman," said Sheftu, climbing out of bed. "You? This morning?" "Nay, during the night sometime, I know not when." Sheftu belted his dressing gown, and, ignoring the old man's troubled eyes, strolled over to the table on which his fruit awaited him. He intended to make no explanation, now or ever, of the lamp Irenaman was going to find burning at his master's bedside every morning from now until the end of his life. There were many nights in a lifetime. It had taken Sheftu only one of them to discover that the gods of the tomb had exacted their tribute after all. He would never again be able to endure a darkened room. Absently, he took his place at the table while the old man served him with fruit and cheese and set his silver-rimmed goblet in front of him. Sheftu himself reached for the flagon of milk, only to snatch his hand back as if burned. Next instant he had torn the collar of lotuses from the flagon and flung it from him. "Your lordship," gasped the old man. "Have I no other flowers in my gardens, Irenaman?" "Aye, dozens. They but await your pleasure, my lord. There are scarlet sage and heliotrope and larkspur and, stay now, mignonet. But the lotuses were ever your favorite." "I have lost my taste for them," said Sheftu savagely. "1,000 pardons, my lord, if they have offended you." Irenaman hurried to gather up the lilies and hide them from sight in his wide sleeve, every line of him quivering with distress. "May I further serve your excellence before I—" "Nay, begone." Irenaman turned disconsolately and padded toward the door. Sheftu leaned forward on his elbows, rubbing his forehead with both hands. Why doesn't Sheftu like the lotuses? They remind him of Mara, and he doesn't like Mara now because she still has the ring, and that tells him that she must be a traitor. "Irenaman," he said, "please come back." He waited until the old man stood beside him again, then reached for the flagon and poured the goblet full of milk. "I want you to send a slave to the wharf. Bid him discover if a ship called the Silver Beetle has docked this morning." "Yes, your excellency. And, Irenaman, I spoke in haste, old friend, about the lotuses." "Pray, do not think of it, my lord." There was a silence. Sheftu raised his eyes and met the sad, concerned ones of his major domo. "You have great trouble," said the old man softly. "Aye, trouble with a maid." "A maid? Is that all, my lord?" "It is quite enough, Irenaman. I fear I have been a fool. I plucked a lily from the gutter, and it has turned to a cobra in my hands." The old man's nostrils flared a little with his quick intake of breath, and his mouth set hard. "Then you had best destroy it without mercy." "Never fear, but it may have been done for me already. Be not surprised if you do not hear from me for a day or two. I shall be safe, but absent. If anyone inquires here, say that I have gone to Abydos." Sheftu smiled faintly. "Nay, Do not look so, not over yet. Go now. Send the barber up in 15 minutes and make haste to inquire about that ship. Aye, my lord, and may the gods be with you. The old servant hurried out, and Lord Sheftu turned at last to his breakfast. An hour later, he was crossing the worn stone wharfs to the Beetle's anchorage. Nikonk hung over the gunwale, his arms propped wide, his shoulders burnished copper in the brilliant sunlight. Every line of him spelled anxiety. Sheftu stepped into the cool shadow of the hull, swung onto the rope ladder, and climbed up through the blue-green dancing reflections into the glare of sun on deck. Nikonk stretched out on a big hand to haul him overboard. Was it you sent down to see if we had docked yet? He whispered. Aye. Naught's amiss, is it? I landed your cargo at 4 this morning and was back by sunrise. All's well with my task. It's something else. Send your men ashore. I must talk to you. Nikonk bellowed an order, waved his hairy arms as the crew swarmed down the ladder, chattering like monkeys over the unexpected liberty. Sheftu walked to the far side of the deck and stood there, feeling the warm sunshine beat down over his head and shoulders and the backs of his hands where they lay clasped on the rail. The very air smelled of heat and sun and water this morning. A fleet of fishing boats traced in gilt skimmed across Sheftu's line of vision, their sails pure light and their shadows ink puddles. 2 barges moved ponderously upstream. Far across the river a hawk flapped up suddenly, curved and soared and dwindled to a speck in the cobalt sky. Nikonk came up beside him, wheezing a little. All's clear, mate. They're gone. Now, what's amiss? We've a spy to reckon with, Captain. Hi, that's easy. Nikonk's hand went to his knife. Only tell me where he'll be tonight. She'll be at the inn, I fancy. She? Nikonk's voice changed. Who is it? Mara. There was a stunned silence. After a moment, Nikonk began to swear bitterly under his breath. I can't believe that, he burst out. Have you proof? Not yet. Then how can you patience? I'll tell you everything. Do you remember the day in your cabin yonder when we hatched our plans? I gave her a ring. I, to bribe her friend in Abydos. There was no friend in Abydos, Nikonk. She has the ring yet. She forgot and left it on her hand last night. Oh, mother of the gods, said the captain wearily. He rested both forearms in the gunwale, staring out at the river. And she had no explanation? Oh, indeed she did. Can you picture that maid without an explanation? But she was lying. Now, how do you know, mate? It may be she found a way to get what she wanted in Abydos without bribing that fellow. I'll wager she never had a trinket of her own, and what a trinket that was, to be sure. It would tempt the most scrupulous of— Aye, you can smile. I know the maid's not overburdened with scruples, but think of the life she's led, by the sacred eye. Ill-used and half-starved, at the mercy of this master and that one. Save your breath, Nikonk. I used her well enough, and got naught but treachery for thanks. I assure you I've done some thinking about this, though a little late. She kept the ring because she didn't need it as a bribe. Everything was arranged for her already in Abydos. She was a spy when she boarded the ship. Why, she was naught but a little runaway. So we believed, said Sheftu grimly. So I continued to believe until last night, when I came to my senses. She didn't run away at all, Nikonk. I think she was sold. He waited, then looked around at his companion. Nikonk's still face was carved in sunlight, the jutting nose copper, the eyes deep caverns. To an agent of the Queen, Sheftu went on softly. That changes everything, doesn't it? I'll wager I have no hold over her, not the slightest, and never did have. A comforting thought, is it not, when you remember what she knows, what she could tell? Why hasn't she told then? For the love of Amun, She could have wrecked our craft 4 weeks ago. Why in the name of... That's the question. Why? I was hard-pressed to find the answer, I confess. The conch eyed him thoughtfully. I'll wager I know the answer now. Devotion to me, you think? Captain, pray do not ask me to believe in fairy tales. Sheftu's voice was savage, and he realized he was gripping the rail so hard his fingers ached. He had suspected Nakonk would say something like that sooner or later, but he had not known what it was going to do to him, how vividly the warm touch of Mara's lips would come back to him, even the fragrance of the lotus in her hair. He jerked his hands from the rail and turned his back to it. Nay, we've underestimated the maid. She's playing both sides, Captain, that's the answer. She's maneuvered me as neatly as a toy on a string, all the while dangling this master of hers, this queen's man, from another finger. Hi, she's clever, is she not? No matter who loses the game, she means to win. I don't believe it. You yourself said you've no proof. I said, not yet. I mean to obtain it, and I mean you to help me. Now, how can we do that? Roared the captain, slapping his palm down upon the gunwale. Man, you can't judge a thing like that on the word of another. Give the maid a chance to defend herself. She may have reasons we know not of. Good reasons. She'll have every chance, Captain, said Sheftu softly. Every chance. He eased around to face Nikonk. I am interested in your attitude toward all this, but I confess, a little confused. Perhaps you can enlighten me. Till now, I understood your allegiance to be to myself and the king, and no one else. Was I mistaken? Nikonk's sun-burnished face lost a little of its rich color. He started to speak, swallowed, and then turned to stare out over the river. What are my orders? He growled. You will not care for them, nor do I, but we shall get a trap. We shall set a trap. That's fair enough, as I think you'll have to agree. If she's innocent, the bait won't even tempt her. And if she's guilty, if the trap works, Sheftu shrugged. Cold eyes gave the answer. All right, roared Nakonk. Get on with it, can't you? What am I to do? You're to go to the Falcon tonight. I'll be with you to make sure all's well, but I'll not go in. Give her some message from me. Sheftu hesitated, then gestured impatiently. I'll think of one presently. It must reassure her so she will think I've dismissed the whole matter of the ring as something of no importance. Make certain she feels safe, Nakonk. If she's seen the king, she'll have a message for me. Say I've sent you for it. Act a little excited, as if you had heard good news, as if there were plans afoot. In time, you will tell her those plans. They're the bait for our trap. Do you understand thus far? Aye, muttered Nakonk. Sheftu fastened his gaze on the purple sail of the temple boat far out across the blinding, dancing water. Do not tell her alone, however. Wait until there are others present. Nefer, the goldsmith, Ashur, Suhure, it matters little who, but no lingering uneasiness about that ring must prevent her reaching for the bait. If others hear what she heard, she will feel she could blame the treachery on any one of them if she had to. Hark now, drop your news casually into the midst of this company. Say the leader I represent has obtained almost limitless funds from some wealthy Theban. Say that the gold is to be smuggled away to a place of safety tomorrow night at about the mark of 8 on the vessel. What ships will be loading cargo tomorrow evening, Nakonk? The friend of the wind will be. She sails the following dawn. That will serve. On the vessel, friend of the wind. Sheftu straightened, drawing a long breath. If the Queen's soldiers raid that ship tomorrow night, Captain, we'll have our proof. And if little Blue Eyes does not take your bait? Nay, she knows the time is running out. She could want no better chance to deliver the whole revolution to that master of hers, gold, rebels and all, and be off with her own winnings. She'll take the bait, right enough, unless she's innocent. Now, is there anything I've not thought of? Nay, you would seem to have thought of everything, said Nakonk bitterly. Stay though. You've not told me that message from you, the one that is to reassure her. Oh yes, that. Sheftu ran his palm carefully along the gunwale. It was hot from the sun, and the grain of the wood showed clear and beautiful in the strong light. You may tell her, he said, that I have not forgotten what I said last night when I held her in my arms. Nakonk regarded him a moment in silence, then turned away. Gods of Egypt, this is ugly business, he snarled. Aye, Captain, it's an ugly world. Sheftu pushed away from the rail and started across the glaring decks, the other following. Remember, he added sharply, you're but the counter in this game. I choose the gambits. Is all clear now? I think so. Will I meet you at the Falcon? On the wharf yonder. We'll go together. The conch nodded sourly, scowling at an imperfectly coiled rope lying near the stern sweeps. Ast! Look at that! He roared suddenly, striding over to kick it in a sprawling pile. By the 40 judges, these idiots can't do anything right. Rivermen, they call themselves. High swineherds, more likely. Leaving him manhandling the rope and cursing savagely, Sheftu swung over the side and down the ladder. He knew how Nakonk felt. The cheerful laughter of a pair of deckhands on the next ship grated on him like a file on stone as he dropped to the wharf, slung his cloak half over his face, and strode for the nearest valley. The tavern courtyard was dark and empty when Sheftu and Nakonk pushed open the gate that night and cautiously let themselves in. They crossed the yard in silence, and Sheftu melted into the shadow of the Dom Palm, while Nakonk strode on to the torchlit door and disappeared inside. A moment later, he thrust a hand out to signal. Sheftu left the Dom Palm and moved swiftly across the paving stones and into the little entry hall, closing the door silently behind him. She's here, muttered Nakonk. He motioned toward the door to the big common room, which he had half shut to conceal Sheftu's entrance. Stepping to the crack at the hinge, Sheftu peered through it. One glance told him all was well. A second showed him a lithe, familiar figure curled up in the corner booth, waiting for him. She had slipped her sandals off as usual and had tucked her feet under her. Her bare, brown shoulders gleamed in the torchlight, looking like carven gold in contrast to the snowy straps of her dress and the ink-black locks which fell over them. As always, she had fastened a lotus in her hair. A hard, cold core formed inside Sheftu. With a jerk of his head, he motioned Nakonk on into the room. Ah, good evening, Captain. May thy Ka rejoice. It was Ashura's voice, and almost at once his broad back appeared in front of the door crack, cutting off Sheftu's view of the room. By the time the innkeeper moved on, Nakonk was approaching the corner booth. As he stopped beside it, Mara's head jerked around as if he had pulled a string. Sheftu found that he was chewing his lip cruelly and made himself stop. Her first sharp, wary glance had told him much. It was the same look she had given him that day on the Beetle, when he had surprised her out of sleep, and it reminded him of nothing so much as a quick-drawn sword. She had disguised it at once this time, and appeared to be questioning Nakonk as he edged his big body into the booth beside her. Sheftu watched him closely as he answered her. He was making a great to-do about settling himself on the mat, his eyebrows going up and down with elaborate nonchalance as he talked. Nakonk could shrug his eyebrows as other men shrugged their shoulders. He seemed to be convincing Mara that all was as usual. Feeling relief as to that, coupled with a restlessness of such prickling intensity that he felt he was being bitten all over by flies, Sheftu left his post and moved distractedly about the tiny entrance hall, then returned to his crack. Even from across the room, her eyes looked blue. Sheftu leaned against the wall and let the noise and music and clatter of crockery beat against his ears, trying to pick out her quick laughter from the confusion. trying once again to fathom the strange quality of wistfulness which underlay all her swift changing expressions, even the most sardonic, the most impudent. What was Nakonk saying to her now? She had grown serious, frowning down at the cup she toyed with, nodding. He spoke again and laughed, and as she raised her vivid eyes to him, her whole provocative gamin's face lighted in an answering grin. Suddenly Sheftu could bear no more. He fled silently out of the inn, through the dark courtyard and across the street, where he took up his waiting again in a doorway that smelled evilly of filth and rotting fish. It seemed hours before the courtyard gate clicked open and Nakonk emerged. Sheftu took a firm grip on himself and managed to appear casual as he joined him. Well, Captain? Mate, I did what you told me. That's all you can ask, is it not? Did she seem... Did you watch her face when you dropped the bait? No, said Nakonk woodenly. After a moment, he started down the shadowy street, and Sheftu fell in beside him. They walked in silence through the alleys and byways into the warehouse district, edging the wharf. When they came to the customs dock where their ways separated, Nakonk faced around doggedly. Look you, Sashai, I know as well as you what's at stake in this, and if the maid trips herself up, well, it's her own doing, and I've naught to say for her. But if that vessel's raided tomorrow night, mate, I could whisk her on board the Beetle and sail straight for the Delta. She'd be no danger to anyone. You'd never see her again, but you could still spare her life. His voice trailed into silence. Sheftu was slowly shaking his head. Chapter 21, The Quarry. Darkness lay thick the next night about a certain warehouse on the riverfront of eastern Thebes. Some distance away from it, at the water's edge, a yellow glow of torchlight spilled across the wharfs from the decks of the Friend of the Wind, which lay close in against the dock to receive her cargo. They were still loading her, figures moving against the light, hump-backed with burdens as they filed up the gangplank and across the deck. There were the usual thumpings and slammings and bellowed orders above the lighted decks. The tall, black mass swayed gently against the stars. Beyond, the dark length of the river wound away southward, splashed with gold here and there wherever a torch burned. In the gloom beside the warehouse wall, screened by a pile of fish nets, and old lumber, Nakonk heaved a sigh of impatience and tried for the 50th time to get comfortable on the coil of damp rope he was sitting on. Sheftu, a dim blur in the shadows beside him, seemed not to have moved for an hour. The captain wondered bitterly if he had fallen asleep. For all the anxiety Lord Sheftu exhibited, one would think he had come here merely for a breath of air. As for Nakonk, it had been the longest day he had ever known, and he'd made rough weather of it, alternating between bellowing ill temper and silent worry until by mid-afternoon every man in his crew was keeping a wary eye on him and his own nerves were taut at a straining hawser. He felt even more tense now, lurking here like a cat at the edge of darkness. The captain eased his shoulders back against the rough wall and tried to make his mind a blank. The reek of fish and hemp and rotting wood rose strong about him inside the warehouse. He could hear the loud scratching and scrabbling of a rat. Beyond the edge of the pile of nets, the burdened figures moved monotonously back and forth in the torchlight from the dock to the Friend of the Wind. Nakonk found himself automatically checking her trim. Overloaded on the port side, he muttered with a gloomy satisfaction. Cargo master's a fool. Sheftu's voice came out of the shadows, cool and ironic. It scarcely matters, does it? Of course it matters. They'll have to shift half of those bales before they're well into the current. What do you mean it scarcely... I mean, they'll likely not be sailing. Nakonk abandoned the subject, shifting his position once again and cursing irritably at the prickling roughness of the rope. Patience, Captain, soothed the other. It cannot be long now. By all the gods, is he even human, thought Nakonk. Do you care not for what happens to this maid? He got no answer, but Sheftu's voice was a little less smooth when he spoke again. You tied the boat where I told you? Aye. In the papyruses at the far end of the wharf. It's ready. They were silent again. After a time, Nakonk twisted around to scan the black mouths of the alleys, still quiet and deserted, then squinted up at the stars. By the beard of Ptah, if it isn't the mark of 8 by this time, I'm no riverman. He stood up, checked the alleys one by one, then sized up the stack of bales on the dock. Mate, they've all but finished loading. Look yonder. I'll wager a sail to Ashenti the hour's 8 or past. He stood clenching his fists to keep them from trembling. It should happen now. It should have happened already, if it was to happen. He realized Sheftu had risen too, and was standing stiff and erect at his side, scarcely breathing. Still the minutes crept past. The commonplace sounds of loading went on. By Ammon, she's won, thought Nakonk at last. She didn't take our cursed bait. All's well. He opened his mouth to blurt it out and felt Sheftu seize his arm. Captain, look. A light shone in the mouth of one of the alleys. Nakonk tried to blink it out of sight, pretend that it was moving the other way, but it came on, brighter and nearer, accompanied by pounding footsteps. A knot of soldiers burst out onto the wharfs with more at their heels. They were regulars in green helmets. There was a shout of surprise from the loaders, a roar that answered it. In the name of the Queen! Next moment, the night was alive with running men with torches and glinting blades, and a confusion of yells as the raiders poured across the wharf and up the gangplank of the Friend of the Wind. The conch dug both fists into his forehead to shut out the sight. Name of Ammon, she's only a child, he thought. A waif, after all, who's seen naught but ill luck all her life, and needs friends and a chance. So be it. I've seen enough, said Sheftu quietly. Nikonk had seldom in his life been afraid of anyone, but he was afraid now of the tall young man who stood beside him. Mate, he whispered hoarsely, let me do it. I'll find her. I'll have her out of Thebes tonight. I swear by... You'll follow my orders, Captain. Sheftu flung him a look that left nothing but obedience in Nikonk's mind. Come to the boat. He slipped out of their hiding place, and Nikonk followed. They plunged down the lane beside the warehouse into the next dim street, and then along it parallel to the river at a pace that left the captain no time to think or even feel. His mind had gone numb in any case. He knew they were making for the hidden boat, that they would cross the Nile and lie in wait for Mara somewhere on the other side, intercepting her as she was starting for the inn. He knew what was to happen in some dark alley, and that he could not prevent its happening. But it all seemed unreal, a nightmare from which he could not wake. They swerved back toward the river. A few minutes later, Nakonk was dragging the boat from the concealing papyrus stalks, still moving like an automaton. Cast off the painter. I have a paddle here somewhere. They pushed off across the black water, and with the familiar rocking motion, the feel of the paddle in his hand, the conk's numbness began to wear off. He pulled harder and more fiercely so that the boat shot like a live thing through the current, but the exertion failed to stop his thoughts. Bear to your left, Captain, said Sheftu at last. We'll make for that statue on the bank. The fishing punt was there, moored to the great granite toe as always, and old Ankh dozed nearby. Sheftu nudged him awake none too gently, flipped him a deben, and ordered him home, then hurried up the bank. She's a cold-blooded little traitor, Nakonk told himself desperately as he tied their own boat and hurried to follow. Did she give a thought to you when she decided to turn informer, or even to Sheftu? She's earned what she's coming. She'd have run the whole plot aground if she could. Just don't think. Don't look at her. Remember, don't look at her. This will serve, said Sheftu coolly. I believe she's coming. Nakonk emerged abruptly from his preoccupation. They stood in an alley ahead. Up its murky, narrow length, he could just make out a slender, cloak-swathed figure hurrying through the shadows. Nakonk wet his lips and glanced around him, wishing he could stop going hot and cold like a man with fever. Sheftu had chosen his spot well. The lane was deserted, closed in by buildings that would remain dark and empty until morning. There would be no one to disturb them. Walk casually to meet her, murmured Sheftu. He strolled forward, and Nakonk trailed after him, wiping his sweaty palms on his thighs. Presently Mara drew close enough to catch sight of them, and he could hear her sharp little intake of breath as she halted. An instant later she recognized him. Sheftu! Her voice was low, but it held only surprise and pleasure, no fear. She moved swiftly to join them, looking from one to the other in amusement. What is this, pray? An ambush? One might call it so, answered Sheftu silkily. Come, I want a word with you. He took her arm and guided her to a recessed doorway, while Nakonk drifted a little apart, where he could watch both ends of the alley. He could hear Mara's uneasy little laugh. Have you all the words you wish? But why choose this place, an inn? At the inn we could. You'll not be going to the inn tonight. Why will I not? She hesitated, and her tone changed. Sheftu, you're acting strange. Is aught amiss? Aye, much is amiss. The vessel, Friend of the Wind, was raided tonight by the Queen's soldiers. She gave a gasp Nakonk could have sworn was genuine. Osiris, with all the gold aboard her? Aye, when you travelled the shores of the night to bring it back? Nay, they can't, it mustn't, those. Her voice broke with fury, and for a moment her language reeked of Memphi's waterfront. But shall we do naught but wail of it? For the love of Amun, we must do something. You must do something, Sheftu. You're the leader. Aye, a brilliant leader. Sheftu's voice remained quiet, but the whiplash Nakonk had been dreading came into it now. I've saved Egypt with one hand and destroyed her with the other, by trusting a maid as faithless as the wind. Mother of the gods, whispered Mara, you think I did it? My lovely Mara, no doubt exists. But I didn't do it. I didn't. There must have been another who listened. I didn't do it. Sheftu, the juggler, aye, that's who it was. He was there, ask Nakonk. He heard everything. It was that babbling Sahure. May the devourer take him. I knew he'd betray us before we'd done with him. Did I not tell you? I warned you. I was certain you would place the blame elsewhere. Est, Sheftu, you're blind. You have ever been blind about that rogue, and look at you now. All the gold gone, the plans ruined. Mara, said Sheftu softly, there was no gold on that ship. There was a sudden silence. Nakonk edged toward them without knowing what he did. He was beginning to feel as if he could not breathe. Suppose it were Sahure. It could have been. It was possible, even probable. Then by all the gods. Stay away from her, Captain, ordered Sheftu. Mara drew a soft, irregular breath. Why? She whispered. Why should the captain stay away from me? Because he has revealed an unfortunate weakness where you're concerned, said Sheftu. He moved closer to her. For the first time, he was failing to hide the strain he was under. Nakonk could see the tension in his shoulders, and his voice had grown harsh and thick. This affair is between you and me, little one. Do you understand? Let me make it quite clear to you. There was no gold on that ship, nor was it our ship. The news was false. It was a trap, Mara, and you walked into it. Sheftu, I did not betray you. I swear by my Ka. Asked be silent. I know all about you, all. I know you're a slave in the Queen's pay, and have been since you took the ship with us in Memphi. I know you lied to me then, and have lied to me every day I've known you, and would go on lying until the end of time if it would get you what you want. Your master believed you, didn't he? I know of that too, how cleverly you've played, both sides waiting, holding back, until last night you thought you'd chosen certain victory. Mara was slowly, almost imperceptibly backing away from him, though she seemed scarcely to move or even breathe. Suddenly, she whirled to run. Just as suddenly, Sheftu's hand shot out and seized her wrist. In a flash, He had doubled her arm behind her and jerked her close to him. He held a gleaming knife in his other hand. "Not this time, little one," he said softly. His rough handling had caused the cloak to fall away from her hair, and the fragrance of lotuses now drifted through the alley. Nakonk, flattened stiffly against the building opposite, tried to look away and couldn't. His eyes were fastened on the knife blade, and he became gradually aware that it was trembling. "How could you have kept him satisfied, I wonder," whispered Sheftu, "that master of yours, whoever he is. What have you told him? How much have you told him?" Mara, too, was staring at the knife, shrinking away from it as far as his grip would let her. "Sheftu," she breathed, "you can't do it. You can't." "Oh, can I not? Who will ever know or care?" She looked up at him suddenly, and then Nakonk witnessed a very strange thing. Instead of shrinking from the knife, she flung herself close against Sheftu, twining her free arm about his neck, and kissed him on the mouth. What happened next was never clear in Nakonk's mind. He was aware of a strangled oath from Sheftu, the clatter of a knife hitting the gravel, and felt Mara hurtle against him as if she had been thrown. Instinctively, Nakonk wrapped his arms about her and whirled so that his own body shielded her. "Take her, Captain," gasped the voice that might have been Lord Sheftu's. "Take her out of Thebes, out of Egypt, anywhere, but never let me see her again." Hasty footsteps plunged away up the alley, pounded around a corner, and were gone. When Nakonk's head cleared a little, he found that he was cursing steadily and idiotically under his breath, still clutching Mara tight in his arms. He stopped, wet his shaking lips, and loosened his hold to peer down at her. She was weeping stormily. He did not know whether in anger or in fright. "Is all well with you, little one?" he muttered. "He didn't harm you." She shook her head, burrowed harder against his chest, and continued to sob. He held her uneasily, patting her shoulder now and then, and growling vague comfort under his breath. He was not used to weeping maidens, and had no idea what one did for them, but he felt dimly that it would be best to let her weep her fill. Presently the storm subsided a little, and after a moment she stirred and lifted her head. "Nakonk, where is he?" "Gone, little one. Likely halfway to the Falcon by this time." "He'll go there?" "Aye, I think so. He'll want to make sure all's well, and besides what?" "Well, little one," said Nakonk gruffly, "I think he'll be warning them about you." "Ordering them to murder me on sight, I'll wager," she burst out. Excuse me. "Just on the chance you'll not take me far enough to the ends of the earth." "Aye, just on the chance, just on the chance," he soothed. "But we'll not founder on that sandbar until we hit it. I must take you away, little one. You know that, don't you?" She stirred fretfully against him, and he dropped his arms, studying her profile in the gloom. "Look you, maid, how much of that was true, what he accused you of?" "Oh," her hand had wandered to the crushed lotus in her hand had wandered to the crushed lotus in her hair. She pulled it out, looked at it a moment, and dropped it to the ground. "All of it, Nakonk, save about the ship. Sahure told that. He must have, because I never did, or I never even meant to. I swear I've told naught." She broke off, seemed to hold her breath a moment. "At least not much," she suddenly went on. "As for the rest, can I be blamed for that? I didn't ask to be sold, but, mother of truth, it was a chance to be free, perhaps rich. What did I know about the king then? I'd not even met Sheftu. Once I did, then I wished I'd never seen that cursed master of mine. But, Nakonk, I've told him naught that matters. I've but played hounds and jackals with him. I had to do that, didn't I? If I'd not done it, he'd have thrown me back into the gutter." "Aye, she's just a child," Nakonk was thinking, "a little waif in a cursed ugly world, and none to befriend her. No matter, it's past now," he muttered, patting her awkwardly. "We'll have a fine voyage, clean to Crete, if you like. Crete's a good land, little one, an island, a mite odd and foreign, but pleasant and lively enough even for you. They've acrobats there, men and maids both, who dance about under the horns and bulls, and leap over their backs so that you've never seen the like. You'll be no slave either, and I'll wager you could sell that ring of yours for 100 gold Deben. Aye, come, little Blue Eye. Crete's the place. Let's be out of this dark alley. You're so good to me, Nakonk, whispered Mara, and I'll come, but she hesitated, resisting when he tried to draw her forward. What's amiss now, maid? Nakonk, how do we know he's gone? He might be waiting just yonder around the corner, or he might have changed his mind and come back. Nay, don't worry, he's gone. Aye, how can you be sure? Now then, if it'll ease your mind, I'll make certain of it. Come, stand in the doorway here. I'll be but a moment. Guiding her gently into the niche, the captain walked up the alley in the direction Sheftu had taken. He knew he would find no one. Her fears were needless, but he well understood them and meant to humor every one if it would help her. The winds had tossed her craft enough, he thought belligerently, in her 17 short years. It was time somebody steered a straight course for her. As he had expected, the street beyond was quite deserted. He examined several dark nooks nearby so he could tell her he'd done so, then strode back into the alley. The first moonbeams were beginning to sift their way into it now, out in the open on the river. It would soon be bright enough to navigate with fair accuracy. It would be a good night to sail, Nakunk decided, though it might not be wise to venture into those currents beyond the sandbars. They'd slip downstream a few miles and tie up until the captain halted and frowned about him uncertainly. Was this not the doorway? He glanced back the way he had come, wondering if he'd misjudged the distance, decided perhaps he had, and started on. Then he stopped abruptly. There in the gravel at his feet the moonlight glittered over the blade of the jeweled knife, and a cubit or two away lay a crumpled lotus. Mother of Amen, whispered the captain. The doorway was empty. The whole alley was empty. And that knife, or another, would likely be slicing his own throat before morning, if he didn't find that slippery maid and bring her back. Mother of Amen and Isis and Osiris and the sacred cat of Bast! He exploded. He scooped up the dagger, clamped his jaw at its fiercest, and started up the alley, running hard. Chapter 22 is called Disaster, and the first word is 3. That was 2 chapters. I need to find out. All right, so who says we go on for another chapter? I'm waiting for Rebecca to make a comment, but she's slow with her comments. All right, I guess we'll go another chapter. That's going to make tonight a little long. I hope everybody's okay with it because it's already past 10:30 in Florida. Let me see what my power is at. 44%. Hopefully I make it. Kimberly, where did you go? Kimmy went downstairs. I don't know. All righty. I can't read until Kimmy's here. Do. Well,
and then I looked at it and there was a fly in it.
Perfect. All right, are we ready? Rebecca, sorry, this is going to make tonight's story time a little long and a little late for you. Are you? Okay. Yeah. All right. Chapter 22, Disaster. 3 streets away, Mara was already dodging out of the passage beside the goldsmith's shop and running like the desert antelope along the high, curving wall which bounded the palace grounds. There was but one thing to do, and somehow, through the wild disorder of her emotions, she'd had wit enough to see it and cling fast to it. She was still spent from her storm of weeping, sore in body and mind from Sheftu's merciless handling of her, and shaken in every nerve by the audacious but no less passionate kiss which had saved her life. Sheftu was lost to her beyond recall, but hardest to bear was the ironic twist that this time she was innocent. The ship's raid was none of her doing. It was Tahure. He'd caught it in his gold-baited trap. It was Tahure he'd caught in his gold-baited trap, but he'd refused to believe it, and thereby laid himself and the revolution open to the liveliest danger. Mara alone, though stunned by the abruptness of her own undoing, recognized the extent of that danger. She alone knew that Nehura knew about the Inn of the Falcon. She alone could guess that in his rage at finding nothing on the ship, he might abandon all subtler tactics and storm the tavern, seizing everyone in it and trusting to later luck to find the leader. Aye, but he would already have the leader. The moment he set eyes on Sashai, the scribe, he would recognize Lord Sheftu, and all would be over. There was but one thing to do: find Nahara, learn his plans, and then, if necessary, slip away from him somehow and carry a warning to the inn. On trembling legs, Mara was speeding to do it. The north gate loomed ahead, Rashed's gate. Mara clutched her ring, praying its charm would work once more, though Amun knew it had brought her anything but luck the last 2 days. She had seen Rashed for 4 nights now, having lately used the main gate. She had not seen Rashed for 4 nights now, having lately used the main gate and the password of her master's name for her passage in and out of the palace grounds. She knew not what temper Rashed would be in, but she had to try him. She might need desperately to get out again later, and by that time the use of Nahara's name might be suicidal. Breathless, she halted before the gate, tried in vain to quiet her pounding heart, and finally, rapped 3 times. Rashed recognized the signal. She could hear the faint, sharp clatter of his sword as he made a startled move. An instant later, the gate swung open just far enough for his body to block the entrance. "You!" he growled. "I, Rashed, I am in haste. Please let me in." "What are you doing out? That's what I want to know. I've seen naught of you tonight, not for 4 nights running." "Why, today I went out much earlier with my princess at another gate, and before that, Rashed, I've wanted to come, if only to linger a moment with you and then go back again, but I could never get away from her, not even for a moment." "Aye, very likely. More likely you found some other simpleton to dry your tears and let you in and out whenever you crook a finger at him." Rashed reached out furiously and jerked her closer. "Who is it? That swell-headed sergeant at the main gate?" "Nay, it isn't. I've done no such thing. Oh, mother of truth, let me in. I can't stand here arguing. I'm in haste. I tell you, my brother's dying, and I must get help." She twisted violently in his grasp, but only succeeded in reversing their positions so that it was she who stood with her back to the gate, which hung tantalizingly ajar. He still held her arm fast. "You never had a brother," he said bitterly. "I don't know whom you meet outside there, but I'll stake my sword he's no sick kinsman. Aye, I've caught on to your game, you little witch, though I've been cursed slow about it. You've made a fool of me, letting me risk my post here night after night so you could—" "Rashed, I beg you, I swear by my Ka." Tears of despair choked off the words and changed to sobs of fury. She began to fight him like a wildcat, kicking, clawing, beating at him, spitting out her rage. Let go of me, you stupid clod! I've done naught to you. You've got your cursed post still, haven't you? Let me go, you devil! Suddenly she froze, staring just beyond his shoulder. Great Amun, you're captain! He spun around, and for just that instant, his fingers loosened. An instant was all Mara needed. In a flash she had wrenched away and darted through the gate up the avenue of rams and into the court of the weavers, leaving him cursing bitterly behind her. Let him curse, she thought, as she sped silently along the gravelled paths. He can't leave his gate without raising an alarm, and if he does that, he'll lose his precious post and maybe his head for his part of this affair. But, oh, Amun, now how was she to get out of the grounds again in case she had to? She slowed, almost halted in an agony of hesitation. Should she go back, try to make amends, try to... Nay, the thing was done now. There was no undoing it. Sick with apprehension, she darted on. She reached the great court of storerooms, some distance beyond the stair she ordinarily climbed to the upper corridor and her own chambers. There she stopped, pant, leaned panting against the rough plastered wall, and tried to picture in her mind the plan of the palace Nehere had showed her. The little study he had told her of was near this courtyard. She was sure of that. But which passage? That one to the right. Aye, it must be, for the other one led only to the guard room. It was the one she and Inanni had walked down that day toward the audience with the queen. How long ago that seemed! She moved quickly into the passage to the right, turned right again into the dimly lighted hall, and counted the doors as she passed. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was that one. Without allowing herself to pause or even wonder what would happen next, she opened the door, slipped through into a torchlit, crowded room, and closed the door behind her. Lord Nahara turned from a group of excited soldiers and rivermen and stared at her. You! He burst out. Mara leaned back against the door, feeling all at once spent and weary. Everyone, she thought sardonically, seems overjoyed to see me tonight. Yes, she said. I crave your protection, master. The rebels suspect me. Do they? By my Ka, Amun is good, sending you here at this moment. It has saved my Libyan the trouble of finding you. Slowly he eased down upon the table behind him, folded his arms, and studied her, a faint, chill smile touching the corners of his mouth. Shadzar, he murmured, send these men away. We need them no longer. The Libyan jerked his head as the soldiers and rivermen, crewmen from the Friend of the Wind, Mara guessed, and herded them out through another door. There was still one other person in the room, a quiet figure hunched in the shadows of one corner, but Mara did not move her eyes to see who it was, and the Libyan sauntered back to his post. Lord Nahara spoke again, his voice dripping sarcasm. So, the rebels suspect you. How unkind of them to repay your friendship with cruel distrust. Friendship? I've pretended friendship, master. Did you not send me there to spy on them, learn their secrets? Aye, quite right, I did, but you were so tardy in reporting any of these secrets that, this afternoon, I decided to set a spy on you, my clever one. Only a formality, you understand. To my surprise, the man I picked seemed to be an old friend of yours already. Indeed, murmured Mara. Lord Nahara turned his head. You there, show yourself. Even before she saw him, Mara knew who was gliding out of his shadowy corner. Sahure looked oddly incomplete without his golden balls, but his twisted, cynical smile was the same as ever, his tongue as oily. Live forever, face of the lily. May thy Ka rejoice. May thy ass, you son of 40 devils. Shocking, murmured Lord Nahara. Is that any way to greet a friend? He's no friend of mine. He's a rogue and a serpent. Don't trust a word he says, master. He's as slippery as... Then you're two of a kind. Nahara's pretense was finished now. His voice lashed like a whip. Why did you not tell me of that ship tonight? Because I knew it was a trap. By Amun, you still lie to me. Don't believe her, Excellency, put in Nahara. She was there. She heard what I heard. Yes, I was there, you crocodile, but I had my wits about me, and you did not. The ship was empty, master, was it not? You found no gold aboard it, did you? Nay, you didn't. It was all a hoax, a snare set for me that I had the sense to stay away from. But this fool walked into it. Now they think I did it, and all I've tried to accomplish is wreck. They'll not even let me in the tavern after this. In fact, I hear they've orders to kill me on sight. Ah, breathed Lord Nahara with satisfaction. And just who told you that? Mara bit her lip until she could taste the blood. An, an old man who felt sorry for me. Indeed. Someone whose acquaintance you made during other visits to this inn, no doubt. Those early visits, the ones before I sent you, the ones I knew nothing about until this juggler told me. Gods of Egypt, I'm caught, thought Mara. I can't wriggle out of this one. There's no way out. No way out! She parted stiff lips, but no words came rushing to her tongue from that mysterious reservoir of last-minute inspiration which had so often saved her. She stood paralyzed, wordless, and the silence drew out until it was far too long, far too late now to say anything at all. And she was lost. It was all over. Lord Nahara smiled icily and echoed her thoughts. The game's over, isn't it? Too bad. You must have enjoyed it while it lasted. Come now, who was this old man who warned you? The silence went on. Excellency, murmured Sahure, I think perhaps it was a young man, one called Sashai. He would have warned her. A faint, bitter amusement touched the edges of Mara's mind. Not he, she muttered. Nahara ignored her, turning instead to the juggler. It is sad indeed that I was not aware earlier of your possibilities. You would have been working for me long ago, before these soldiers came in with their useless prisoners. You were beginning to tell me of those who come regularly to this inn. Suppose you continue, Sashai. The scribe, who is this scribe? Excellency, no one knows. It is he who brings orders from the rebel leader, and no one knows him either. It is said even Sashai has never seen him, but it is clear to all that our scribe is smitten with this lily-faced one here, this flower of loveliness. Sahure's world-weary, indifferent eyes rested a moment on Mara, faintly amused, detached, as they might have rested on a stranger, a carven image, a beetle which he had chanced to crush under his sandal. As for the others, there is a goldsmith, his name is Nefer, Ashur the innkeeper and his wife, a priest called Jedit, a riverman, Nakonk, a baker, and several artisans. He did it easily, casually, as if there were nothing here requiring thought or decision. He merely opened his mouth and named them off, her companions, her allies, all Sheftu's trusted followers, those who had laughed with her and counted her one of them, who ate Miftaya's stew or whispered with Sashai or played hounds and jackals night after night while they waited for orders, named them, and so murdered them one by one. Mara stood dry-mouthed, sick, and numbing all over, gazing at last into the face of treachery with which she had been flirting so long. She could not wrench her eyes away from that unbelievable, sinuous figure with its twisted shoulder, its gestures of fluid grace. It seemed as if evil itself were loose in the room. Enough! Enough! Nahara was saying absently. We can net all those when we choose, like a school of fish. It is the scribe who interests me, this mysterious Sashai. Their juggler is a fish who might be worth catching. In fact, I think we will cast our net. Shadzar? Aye, master. Call the soldiers back. There'll be another raid tonight. At once. Stay, send me only their sergeant. I'll give my orders to him. What of her? Nahira's cold eyes moved to Mara. Later. I want plenty of time for that. Plenty of time. Send her to her chambers and post a guard by her door. Perhaps it had better be you. Nay, I want you for this other. Put her under guard. Find a guard with a whip. He smiled thinly at Mara. We will meet again, too clever one. Come, muttered the Libyan, moving like one in an ugly dream. Mara walked beside him through the other doorway, waited while he chose a burly soldier and growled instructions, went on again with her new guard through the halls, up the outside stair to the upper corridor, and at last into her own room. He left her there, standing motionless among the familiar gilded butterflies. A moment later she heard the bolt grate home, then the creak of wood as her jailer settled back against her door. It was some moments before she became dimly aware of the sounds of movement and chatter from the next room. At first she resisted them vaguely, as one brushes away a buzzing fly. But in spite of herself, the numbness began to wear away, the fog to clear from her mind. That was Inani and the Syrian women she had heard in there, talking calmly together as on any other evening, perhaps putting away their games and embroidery, yawning good night. There was another door, the one opening onto the hall from the sitting room. No use, she thought. It's but a step down the hall. The guard would see anyone who went in or out. Excuse me. He guards that one too, or might as well. Without plan or any hope, she moved across her room and passed through the tapestry-hung door into the sitting room. She had been right. The Syrians were in the act of dispersing to their sleeping chambers. A few of them paused to look at her in mild surprise. Inani's face showed a flicker of swift anxiety. Mara, I thought you were... Is anything wrong? My princess, said Mara in a voice that sounded strange even to herself. Could I speak to you a moment? For as long as you like. Inani murmured something to Dashtar, waved all her women out of the room, and hurried over to Mara. Sit you down. Your face is ashen. Shall I fetch water? Nay, I'm all right. Stay with me, please, in my princess. Grasping blindly at Inani's hand, Mara sank onto a couch and, to her own bewilderment, burst into despairing tears. Mara, oh, something terrible has happened, has it not? I felt it the moment you came in here. There now. You shall tell me all about it in a moment. Don't try yet. All's well, all's well. Oh, Amun, I've no time for weeping. I must stop this. Mara brushed the tears angrily from her face, only to be overcome with fresh ones. Everything's tumbled about my ears, princess. All's over. All's wrecked. Smashed. Sheftu tried to kill me tonight. He couldn't do it, quite. But my master can, and means to, and will. There's a guard outside my door now, and I must get out. I must warn them. As coherently as she could, she told the story, the ship, the black moment in the alley, her flight from the conch, then from her shed, and the terrible scene she had just witnessed. Aye, princess, that juggler is the evil one himself. It was the way he did it, carelessly, without passion, as if lives are of no more value than onions, and naught means anything. Osiris, I knew not what evil thing I played with. I did not know it would be like this. I did not understand. Mara, Mara, Inani stroked her hair, trembling. Is there nothing you can do? Nothing. I can't leave these rooms. Even if I could, I'd never get outside the gates. I'd snared fast as a bird in a net. I'm snared fast as a bird in a net. Inani stilled suddenly, then seized Mara's shoulders in both hands. Wait, Mara. It may be that I can help you get out. You, what? How? What? Hush, let me tell you. Do you remember Sharimi, the Syrian woman in the court of the weavers, the one I... You've been seeing her, I knew that. She has a family outside the gates, Mara, in the city of the dead. Often she goes home to them each night, though if the work presses here, she stays on until it slackens and sleeps in a little room off the servants' wing. She is in that place now, in the palace now. I talked with her this afternoon, and she said she would sleep within the walls tonight. But if she were to change her mind, if she were to rise from her couch now and go home to her family outside the gates, taking a young Syrian maid with her, Mara was on her feet. Aye, praise and thanksgiving be to... Quick, princes, find me Syrian clothes, all the scarves and shawls and thick skirts you can gather. Stay, do you think she'll do this for me? She will do it for me, Mara, said Inanni softly. We have comforted each other, and it is as if I were her daughter, and she my own kin. Mara stood for one silent moment, searching the simple, tranquil face and glimpsing a world which she had never known, a world of friends and kin who shared bread and trouble alike. She comforted one another, sorry. And you would do it for me, she whispered, with all my heart. It is not so much I do, it is not much I do. And Nani started for her bedchamber, then hesitated. Suddenly she rushed back to seize Mara's hands, her plump face creased with anxiety. But it is much, and more than much, that you do, Mara. Oh, think carefully. Once outside the walls, you could go free. They would kill you if you go to that inn. You said so yourself. I don't care. I don't care. Make haste. The clothes. Inanni dropped her hands and flew to the door of her bedchamber. That is the end of chapter 22. And we're at an hour and 16 minutes, and my computer just gave me the warning signal that it is running out of power. We have 3 chapters left, but the last one is like 4 pages. That's close to 2. 2 and 4 are close. In the new math world, that's like practically the same. So at this point, we're going to say goodnight. And I know, because it's almost 11 o'clock in Florida, and I know that Rebecca really wants to get some sleep. Although I don't know if anybody gets sleep in the position that we're in right now. So God bless you. I hope that you have a wonderful night's sleep. And we'll find out what happens tomorrow.